highlighted and then not really talked about at all?
Option 6 was the option that was introduced at the evaluation meeting. So we had 5 options in place before that time, and then option 6 was introduced. So it was evaluated, but it didn't have a lot of discussion before the actual evaluation. It was a last-minute addition to the options.
Thank you. Again, to the chair, because I think that I would probably share a lot of concerns as feeling a little bit rushed here, and certainly some unanswered questions, parking being a major one. But now to be clear, I just want to be sure again, really what we're doing is creating an opportunity to apply for a grant. We're not committing to actually doing this option 3 or whatever you decide.
Through your worship, that's correct. We have to have a direction to proceed with grant application. And like I said, this is, we're not asking for approval of $33 million to build out the whole plan. It's going to take a lot of steps to get there. So the grant application is one of the first steps.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Earlier tonight we approved writing CRFC funding. So is there a cost, or is this basically all staff that's doing this? I realize it's the cost of staff, but are we hiring an outside writer to come in and help us with the grant, or?
Through your worship, yes, we did use an outside grant writer for the first phase of the application for the June 1st deadline, and she will be working on the addendum as well. Costs are minimal, about $1,500, I think is what the cost of it.
Councilor Penticton.
Well, first off, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for dedicating your time to this. It was a lot of work. We were, both Councillor Gomez and I had the opportunity to sit with the group, and the amount of information that was discussed at every one of these meetings, I certainly applaud you, Chair, for doing your very best to hold to our timelines, because there was a lot of information to try and get through at each one of these meetings. I hope you don't enjoy retirement too much, because you might need to chair a few more meetings now. But yeah, I would be happy to endorse the staff recommendation at this time and allow the staff to continue working and exploring this option further.
I see a seconder by Councillor Sentence. Councillor Clemens, you are next to speak.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I also want to thank the group. A tremendous amount of effort went into this. Effort and thought. And what I like, what occurred at those meetings was not just a short-term vision. This committee was looking out for the next 50 years. What does the community need in the next 50 years? Not what it needs in the next few years. And the timeline is another thing. It's not something that we need to build in the next few years. It can be spread out over quite a few years if we need to apply for a grant for a twin pad arena, and yet we only build a single pad eventually. That at first. That can happen, and also, and then a second pad add later on if that's deemed necessary by future councils. Or, and the other thing is that we're still, Memorial remains intact, although without ice, of course. In the next few years it'll have ice, but eventually it may go dry floor with this option. And a lot of user groups are going to be able to grow healthily because of that, and I'm really excited about that, and we really need to see what other user groups are able to achieve because there's a dry floor option. So that is why I am supportive of this. Again, more research needs to be done about parking, the actual costs, needs of the community, but I think at this time for this grant application, this is a good decision to make.
Councillor Sahidi.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to thank everyone for what you have achieved. It's a very clear example of how the council and the community can work together to show transparency and inclusiveness. This is a good example of that, so thank you very much for doing that. And yes, I will be supportive of this decision as well, of the formal recommendation.
Sorry, and just for clarity's sake, I'd like to just make it clear that I was moving both 1 and 2 for the recommendations, both.
Option 3, and then for staff to evaluate to do more financial analysis and funding strategies. Yes, yeah, that was part of our staff recommendation, so just for clarity. Yeah, and I just want to remind, obviously this isn't the final decision for council on how to proceed, and we're really born with our infrastructure deficit and identifying that Memorial Arena is 66 years old, McLaren is 46 or 47 years old, so it's not about adding new sport or recreation facilities. It's dealing with an aged building, which we've been given a heads up by engineers to say, we're going to come back in 2 years, so you need to start building a plan on how to deal with this. And it's reassuring that we have up to 2023 to, if we are successful with the grant, to implement or phase in or work that strategy through. And so to be respectful of the history of Memorial, I'm glad that's still in. I thought the process has been good. And Tasha's done a great job evaluating the pros and cons and looking at more year-round multi-purpose facilities and preserving that history of Memorial, which is important to many in the community. And but I think later this fall, this is where the rubber meets the road, and if the grant comes back partial number or funding strategies aren't there, then it vastly dictates how we proceed or perhaps don't proceed. And I think if we can get, I think what's missing is sort of that champion, community champion to go rally the hockey community for starters, some of the other service clubs and the philanthropic people around the community to step up, because really I think the reason the SOEC Event Center got community approval is because there were so many other funding options that came to the table, so the impact to the taxpayer was low, and it was good value for us to move forward. So I think that's the missing piece, which we don't have to debate tonight because we don't have that information. That will be coming in the fall, probably late fall, I would assume. And so this is just the first step to see if we're even successful with the grant and to what level, and it'll help us dictate how we move forward. And for the grant to have some flexibility into it, I think is helpful as well for us. We're not handcuffed. We have options which we're exploring. So, anyone else with comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Mr. Lehman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to thank Council for what I'll call being visionary in deciding you needed a committee to look at this issue. You gave us some excellent staff to support it. You chose 14 community members with varying backgrounds, and I mean varying. We could agree on the time of day to meet. There were some times when we were at each other's throat in some ways, but all in all, great selection of people, great staff to work with. And my hope is that we remember the children, parents, and grandparents of this community for a whole number of years to come, because facilities are crucial to the lifeblood of this community. Thank you.
So before closing, we do have an opportunity for questions from tonight's agenda before going to the media. So if anyone in the gallery has a question from tonight's agenda, yeah, you can just come to the podium there, just name and address, and no, it's on.
Oh, it's on. My name is Jack Shepard. I live at 204-2272 Green Avenue West in Penticton, and I'm also president of the tennis club. So I have a question regarding McLaren Arena. Is there any thought, and because I didn't see it in the presentation, of dry use of that facility, or is the cost of maintaining it or operationally just exorbitant?
Some McLaren Arena dry floor, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Those questions, Kozak?
We did consider that as part of our analysis, and because of the limited size of the floor and the limited ceiling height, it's only 15 feet high, it limits the use of that building. Not all of the dry floor user groups, specifically lacrosse, who's our biggest dry floor user group, they can't use that facility. So the amount of investment required to make it dry floor wasn't worth the further evaluation.
Okay. Then I have a question regarding the multiple uses of Memorial Arena. Obviously, I have a bias towards tennis, being being part of the tennis club. And at one time, there was an indoor facility here which was taken down. There was a promise made to replace it and never has been done. There was even funds set aside for this purpose. I wondered, is there any, I don't see how in the multiple uses that you've suggested for the dry floor of Memorial Arena, how you could accommodate, for example, tennis if we would like to do, which we would like, or obviously an indoor facility, at the same time as lacrosse and other things, and pickleball and perhaps other users. Can that be done or not?
Through your worship, I had mentioned in my presentation that we need to look in more detail on the drive floor opportunities associated with Memorial. So we would need to look at that and see if there would be scheduling conflicts with the amount of users that want to use it. Can we maximize the use, or is it going to be minimal usage? I mean, the other advantage with the recommended option is that if all of the other 4 arenas are able to have summer ice and winter ice, there's more flexibility for rotating drive floor through those facilities if there is an extra need.
Rotating drive floor where?
Through the other arenas, through the SOEC, the training center, and the new twin pad.
Oh,
So
okay. All right.
we take ice out of our arenas to allow for the drive floor use, so that could continue depending on scheduling demands and bookings.
Does this greatly increase the operating costs of the facility if you have to do that?
Memorial was estimated about $200,000 to operate as a dry floor facility. And then in terms of the other arenas, it's cheaper to have ice out than ice in. So the operating costs are lower with dry floor.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else from the gallery with a question for tonight?
Good evening, Mayor, the Council and staff, and task force folks. Bridget Kemp at 115 Warren Avenue West. And if the decision is to move forward with whatever recommendation you end up agreeing on, is it option 3 that's on the table right now? Okay. Not to exclude when you're looking at things down the road, such as parking and how to accommodate parking. And if there are any options to consider including public transit into that, because that would help reduce the parking needs. If the evening service was extended to offer public transit as an option for the viewers, people who can. I'm not asking you to get people to carry all their equipment on the bus, but just to not leave that out of any kind of assessment to improve the service of the evening service. Because I mean, it goes right past here, but the last bus is around 9:30, and so just to not exclude that. Thank you.
Lorraine Stephenson, 280 Street. First, thank you very much to the task force. I've been talking to a few people who've been in it and really appreciate the work that's gone into that by staff, the task force, and members of City Council. I don't have a particular feeling about any particular option, but I do, having read it before I came, respect the fact that option 3 was selected. But while Ms. Kozak was going through the report, a couple of questions came to mind, and I asked these because I know that the community is quite split on whether we should keep Memorial or not. And I think there's a lot of emotion attached to the Memorial, and I think that there's some questions that will come up that I think that City Council and staff should be prepared to answer. So the first question I have is with regard to the high potential. This is page 5 of 9. There's apparently a high potential for matching funding from private donors. So could somebody please explain what funds would be matched? Would it be grant funds that would be matched? Is it a high amount of funds, or is it a couple $100,000, or is it millions?
One of the things we've been looking at, we formed a subcommittee, Your Worship, of finance, and we looked, originally we had, I think, 13 different funding options, including taxation, on the table. We have now narrowed that down to really 5 being what we'll call potential. People have asked me about P3s, public-private partnerships. We know that you need a $50 million project before you can get anybody to come up to the table to fund a P3 now. So that, for instance, that's one that's off. We have looked in the latest, there are companies in this country that go on your behalf for a fee and find philanthropists. And one of the tricks is to get the life insurance policy of somebody, have it willed to the city, and the city borrows against that. Well, that can be costly if you get somebody's, who's 45 and lends you their life insurance policy. But if you have somebody who's in my range, it's a different story. So there's one of the options. We know there are private donors. At the last meeting with council, I mentioned that we are going to go and tap some of our what I call famous stars that have come from this community. You can name dressing rooms after people. You can have other types of naming rights within, not just the outside of the building, within the building. We have also, as you're well aware in the presentation, we talked about debt covered by some of it potentially from the casino revenues. We know that this, as a committee, we know we cannot put this complete burden on taxpayers. We've even talked about the issue of people who use our facilities who don't even live in this community but get an advantage from them. Those are all things that now need to be what we'll call in-depth in a financial strategy investigated as we go through this period waiting for a decision on the 6 million.
Thank you. I asked the question partly because of the word matching in there, and usually, as a person who has fundraised, if you're asking for matching funds, you have an amount that's specified that will be matched by private donors if they meet the target. So that's partly why I was asking that question. Also asking it because it was mentioned by Ms. Kozak that there are some private donors possibly already willing, which I think is great. So I guess I would like to know if the private donors have expectations, if they're going to be donating large sums of money, would they expect to be operating the facility, or is it just community generosity?
I'll classify it as community generosity, Your Worship. We haven't got into that level of discussion with anybody. We are well aware of crowdsource funding now, where if council said, can the citizens match $2 million? If they put in $2 million, we'll put in $2 million towards the facilities that are being proposed. Those are all things that will come out in depth later on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I've mentioned this to Ms. Sentes at our Heritage Committee meeting, that when the city is fundraising for a city facility to citizens, that's fundraising dollars that aren't going to community organizations. So I just want to just ring that little bell, because that's a question that will come up in this next process. So thank you for that. So my next question is, has it been discussed who will operate the facility if this option 3 goes ahead? Will it be the city, or will it be a private company?
Through Your Worship, there has been no discussion on that at all yet. That's not been part of our mandate so far. That would need to happen as part of the financial analysis, because the overall cost will be impacted by the operations of the building.
Okay, thank you. And another point that raises a question in my mind is the high potential to source naming rights for the facility itself. And those of us who were around when the SOEC was voted on will remember that one of the selling points was, well, we get to have a sponsor name the facility, and that would be like quite a lot of money. And then it turned out later that because of the funding source, the restrictions on that particular grant, that was not allowed. So I just would like to make sure that that is looked into fully before that's put out to the public as a hook to support this project. And yeah, that's the only questions I have, and thank you very much again. Oh, I do have one more question, which is, it's really important to me. We've spent about a year now talking about the sportsplex and the arena situation. So I'm wondering when we are going to get around to talking about the library, the art gallery, and the museum. Does someone have an answer? We're all politely waiting, but we can't be polite too much longer.
Well, we've had presentations in terms of the Performing Arts Center, the Performing Arts Center group. And this fall is the next time we start talking about budget-related stuff. So if a particular organization or a group wants to sort of have an opportunity, I think the next few months is now the opportunity to lobby staff to get that on the radar or see where it sits on the radar to come back to us.
Thank you. I asked that question because at the beginning of this whole process, it was going to be a holistic look at all the facilities. And then suddenly the priorities emerged, the Adidas Plex and then the arenas, both of which are involving large amounts of money. So there is legitimate concern about what's going to be left. And we didn't expect to have to lobby to get our names on the list for consideration. I mean, surely these things are important to City Council because they're important to citizens. So I'll end it on that. And thank you very much again.
Ms. Kelsey?
I'm Kelsey, 940 Oakville Street. The wording of the last sentence there, further consultation with the committee or the community prior to the making the final staff recommendation. I'd really like to know if one of the consultations with this community be a referendum on this matter, to make sure that this council has, or the next council, whoever it is, has the mandate of the citizens to go ahead with doing what we're doing. I strongly, yes, I think we should be going through the, going after the grants. I mean, anytime somebody else will give you money to do something, that's wonderful. However, I think it's also very, very important that this council and maybe further council really have the full backing of this citizenry. We didn't have very many people vote in the last election, so do you have a mandate from the city to really go ahead with a $33 million project? It's another super project. Make sure that we need to make sure that the citizens are on board with it. So you can either do that in tandem with the next election, which is October 20th next year. Or, I mean, it'll be cheaper to do it that way than to have a separate referendum on it, but I really honestly feel that the citizens need to have a say in spending this kind of money.
And just so you know, Mr. Bauer, you might want to elaborate, but we're bound to actually go to the electric if we're borrowing over a certain amount or over a certain amount of years. So that would trigger that community sentence. Mr. Bauer, do you want to elaborate in terms of the dollars and the length of time that trigger?
Yes, through your worship. Specifically, the community charter requires that any borrowing over 5 years would require essentially community involvement. So it would require going out and obtaining going through a referendum or the alternate approval process. So any sizable borrowing, and certainly something of this size, would require us to likely take out borrowing in excess of 5 years.
So you said or alternative. You said referendum or alternative.
Alternative approval process.
And what would an alternative approval process look like?
Through your worship, so the alternative approval process would require that the city post its intention, and through that there would, if there was 10% of the population that did not support that, then it would trigger, require ultimately going to a referendum. So if the intent was put out and 10% of the population did not come forward opposing it, then it could proceed forward.
save your time and energy and go straight to the referendum, okay? And money, but I think that's much better. I have grandkids that I'm gonna want to go in this. Matter of fact, I have a new grandbaby that was born today. So I want our facilities. I want this to be a whole part of this. I came, yes, my granddaughter was born today, and I came to City Council. If that is a dedication, well, it's stupidity, it's one of the two. But I'm here because this is all part of what's going to be in our community. I am on the official community plan strategy task force, and so this is really, really important to me because it's an important piece. But as Ms. Epson said, so is arts, okay? Arts and culture, those are important pieces. And I want to make sure that as we go forward with our official community plan, we don't stick our eggs all in one basket, and that we actually, we make sure that we're looking at the whole picture. And so this is only a piece of the puzzle for me. And, but the arts part and the museum and a number of other things are the parks, all kinds of things are very, very much an important part of what is a go forward with the city. So we need to make it attractive, not just to hockey players and lacrosse players, and we need to make it attractive to singers and actors, dancers, and everybody else as well. Everybody needs an opportunity. But my biggest thing is I really, really strongly recommend that save your breath on the alternative process. Because I think anytime you're looking for negative feedback is it's sort of contrary to what the process really is. You want to know that you can go out and say, the people of Penticton voted for this, that they wanted this by this amount. Not, 10% of people complain, so we have to do this or whatever, okay? So that would be my suggestion, my question. Thank you for answering, Mr. Barr, and good luck with it.
Again, to the gallery, this is part of our process over the next few months, sort of narrowing down what funding options are available to us. So obviously, all we got was $6 million. I'm not sure we had a World 20. I'm not sure this would fly. So, but if we got a bunch of other people coming to the table, then it makes a bit more sense to explore further. Anyone else before I go to the media? Mr. Reader.
Good evening. Frank Rieger, 86 Lakeshore, and member of the Task Force Committee. Just wanted to make a couple of comments, maybe just expand slightly on some of what Ms. Kozak has said this evening. But most of my involvement on the committee, I'll confess, was spending time looking at some of the financial issues rather than all of the ice skating issues. And in that process, I think I had some opportunity to make certainly a number of changes in the information that came forward. But during the discussions in those meetings, I expected that the goals for the committee were to also include that there would be a business plan developed on the financial information, and also that there would be a reporting out of the total life cycle costs for the buildings. And in other words, the costs of, if you have a 50-year building and the declining value of that over 50 years, plus the cost of the major capital work that has to get done to those buildings over the 50-year period, those types of costs would also be considered in this. And I think at the moment, the costs that we have forward are the operating costs for the buildings, and not so much the capital and the building. So the committee is now finished, understood, but there, I believe there's a lot of recommendation that work will continue with developing those types of goals. And I guess I'd just like to say I'd certainly like to see that does go forward, that it is allowed to be thorough, and that it does allow for transparency and the type of public consultation and involvement that there's been to date. So just to make those comments, thank you.
I would argue, Mr. Lehman, maybe want to take part of August off, but I would like to see I would like to see this task force certainly continue and close the loop on some of the things that was brought up here, because I think you truly are subject matter experts in this field, and sort of see it to coming back with a bit more of a final recommendation, I think would be beneficial for all of us concerned here. I would assume staff would hope they could bounce ideas off you guys again and help vet the next phase, which Mr. Reeder sort of talked about, which is probably the most important next steps in terms of deciding how our option makes the best sense. We're good with the gallery? I'll go to the media. Mr. Fries, anything to add or ask?
Yes, please. Through your worship to Ms. Kozak, the report talks about BC Hockey expressing some sort of interest in this facility. What are they looking to do there? Or and how far advanced is this?
Through your worship, BC Hockey submitted a letter that we included in our initial grant application, expressing their interest to relocate their offices from Victoria to Penticton. Of course, a lot of things need to happen before that actually takes place, but it's something that we can consider as part of the next phase of work and seeing what the capital costs and what the revenues associated with that would be and if it makes sense for us. And I'm assuming there's different partnerships that would happen with a relocation like that and economic spin-offs and what have you. So it needs a lot more exploration, but it is something that we wanted to make the public aware of that could be a possible opportunity.
Thank you. When it talks about decommissioning McLaren, what does that consist? Is it raising the building or just shutting the lights off and locking the doors, putting it up for sale, or what?
To your worship, that's a good question. We haven't actually considered future use of that facility. What we suggested was decommissioning it as an arena. What happens after that, we need to do a lot more exploration on what some of the opportunities and desires in the community are.
Thank you. And just finally, if Memorial was turned into a dry ice facility, it could still at some point conceivably be converted into a fifth rink if there was a demand for it?
Through your worship, yeah, that's a good point because we did discuss that. Actually, several task force members brought that up as well. We wouldn't change the floor. We wouldn't change the concrete floor at this point if it were to convert to a dry floor. All the brine plates would still be in there. So other than if a plant is shut down for a number of years and not used, there might be some equipment upgrades and what have you that would need to happen, and there would be a cost associated with that, but they would possibly be capable of handling ice again in the future.
Thank you.
Stephen, anything? Good.
Sure, a couple of questions. Thank you, Your Honor. When we talk about converting Memorial into a dry facility, I'm just wondering about the permafrost under the floor, like was discovered in, what was it, 1994 when they did the big repair job to it? Is that still an issue? Is that something that will have to be dealt with if we're no longer freezing the ground?
Ms. Koza, comment?
When the renovations were done in 92 or 94, whatever the year was, they put in a summer ice, a permafrost system. So there is currently no permafrost under the concrete floor. McLaren, on the other hand, is the only arena right now that does not have a permafrost system. So it does have permafrost, but that's not an issue with Memorial anymore.
Okay, that leads into my next question about McLaren. Talking about not evaluated future use of it yet. Would McLaren be usable in the future if it's not kept up as an ice arena? How solid is the building for future uses?
Through your worship, structurally the building is very solid. The areas of the building that are lacking are the size of the ice, the spectator seating, the dressing room. So it's more the functionality of the building that's lacking, but the actual structure is in good shape.
My final question is just about the cost estimates for the new project as they're being developed. The city's already invested in studies to determine possible costs for these options. I'm guessing that we're going to have to pay for another detailed cost analysis now, and I'm just sort of wondering, A, when that would be available, what kind of further cost that's going to be to the city, and would that be a final cost analysis, or would it have to go through another cycle as we get closer to building? Sorry, a lot of questions in one there, I'm sorry.
Your Worship, the cost estimates never stop until you go to a pre-tender estimate is the last cost estimate you'll get, so that's right before you go to tender. So the costs will be refined throughout the process, and that is typically done by a cost consultant or contractor, so somebody that we would have to pay. In terms of the next phase of work, there is a cost to proceeding with a more detailed analysis, but it's part of the capital budget that I already have approved for 2017, so there's no additional funding being requested to proceed with the next phase of work.
Thank you.
That's it for media, so motion to adjourn. All right, thank you very much.